In the heart of London, where folk clings to secrets like ivy to old stone, Detective Alistair Finch was facing a case as perplexing as a riddle wrapped in an enigma. The lexicon Locket, a priceless artifact whispered to hold the lost words of ancient poets, had vanished from the city's most secure museum. It was a ghost of a theft, leaving no trace but a vacuum of silence. Alistair, a man whose mind was his sharpest weapon, knew this wasn't a simple smash and grab. This was a performance, and he was the unwilling audience. His first task was to understand the players, the cast of characters orbiting the missing locket. He began with the museum curator, a man named Sterling, whose perfectly pressed suit seemed to hold more starch than his alibi. Sterling wrung his hands, his voice a polished drone of corporate regret. He spoke of budget cuts, of security stretched thin, but Alistair sensed something else beneath the surface. Next came the historian, a woman named Elara Vance, whose passion for the locket was almost possessive. She spoke of its cultural significance, her eyes alight with a fervor that could easily curdle into obsession. And finally, there was the enigmatic art dealer, Mr. Silas Croft, a man who dealt in shadows and whispers, whose interest in the locket was purely, he claimed, academic. Each story was a thread, and Alistair's job was to see which one, when pulled, would unravel the entire tapestry of lies. The characters were duplicitous, meaning they were deceitful, two-faced, and experts at hiding their true intentions. Sterling's feigned helplessness, Elara's scholarly obsession, Silas's detached interest, it all felt like a carefully constructed play. Alistair had to juxtapose their statements, which means to place them side by side for the purpose of comparison or contrast. He laid out their timelines, their supposed whereabouts, and their emotional responses. Sterling said he was in his office all night, yet a security guard recalled seeing him in the exhibit. Elara claimed she left before the museum closed, but her entry fob was used an hour after. Silas insisted he was at a gallery opening across town, but no one could vouch for him. The contradictions were like hairline fractures in a mirror, each one distorting the truth a little more. It was clear that at least one, if not all of them, was lying through their teeth. The more he compared their stories, the more the inconsistencies piled up, forming a mountain of deceit. Alistair felt he was getting closer, not to the locket itself, but to the lie that would lead him to it. He just needed one more piece, one tiny detail they had all overlooked. Days bled into a week of dead ends and frustrating circles. The press was having a field day, painting the police as bumbling amateurs. Alistair felt the pressure mounting, but he retreated into his process, rereading his notes, replaying the interviews in his mind. He kept returning to the scene of the crime, not the empty pedestal where the locket once sat, but the periphery, the overlooked corners of the Grand Hall. And that's when he saw it. Tucked beneath the velvet rope of a nearby exhibit, almost invisible against the deep crimson carpet, was a single, iridescent sequin. It was a surreptitious clue, meaning it was kept secret, stealthy, and obtained by clandestine means. It hadn't been logged in the initial sweep. It was a whisper in a room shouting with silence. Alistair picked it up carefully with his tweezers. It wasn't from a museum uniform. It was flamboyant, expensive, and utterly out of place. And in that moment, he had his epiphany. An epiphany is a sudden, intuitive perception or a moment of great revelation. It was as if all the jumbled puzzle pieces had suddenly snapped into place, forming a clear and undeniable picture. The sequin didn't belong to the stern curator, the obsessive historian, or the shadowy art dealer. It belonged to someone else entirely, someone who had been there that night, but had never been considered a suspect. He knew who had the locket. It was time to set the stage for his own final act. Alistair picked up his phone and made a single call. "Gather everyone at the museum," he said calmly. "The show is about to begin." Alistair stood before them all in the great hall, Sterling the curator, Elara the historian, and Silas the dealer. but there was a fourth person present, summoned at Alistair's request. Lady Beatrice, a wealthy socialite and patron of the museum, known for her lavish parties and dazzling gowns. She was famously gregarious, a word that describes someone who is fond of company, sociable, and outgoing. She laughed and chatted, seemingly unbothered by the somber mood. "Alistair, darling," she trilled. "How terribly dramatic. Have you caught your little thief?" Alistair smiled faintly. "As a matter of fact, Lady Beatrice, I have." He then revealed the sequin, holding it up to the light. It matched the shimmering fabric of the gown Beatrice had worn to a gala hosted at the museum the night of the theft. Her smile faltered. Beneath that gregarious exterior was a deeply acerbic personality. Acerbic means sharp, forthright, and even bitter in tone or temper. "That proves nothing," she snapped, her voice losing its musical quality and turning to ice. Her friendly mask had shattered, revealing the bitter, entitled woman beneath. She believed the locket, an heirloom of a rival family, rightfully belonged to our ancestors, and had used her access and charm to orchestrate the perfect crime. Standing before the small, stunned crowd, Alistair laid out the whole story. "It was a clever plan," he began, his voice calm and measured. "But it's often the smallest details that betray the grandest schemes. The key was to look past the obvious suspects and consider the entire context of the evening." He turned to Lady Beatrice, whose face was now a mask of cold fury. "You see, solving this case was like learning a new vocabulary. First, I had to understand the duplicitous nature of the initial interviews. Duplicitous means deceitful, and everyone here tonight was hiding something, creating a smokescreen for me to navigate." He gestured to his notebook. "Next, I had to juxtapose the stories. That means to compare them side by side. When I did, the inconsistencies were glaring. Everyone's alibi had a hole in it, but only because they were all, in their own way, covering for their own minor indiscretions from that night, inadvertently helping the real thief." He then held up the small evidence bag with the sequin. This was the surreptitious clue. Surreptitious means secret or stealthy. It was a tiny piece of evidence left behind by accident, something no one was meant to see. It didn't belong to our obvious suspects, but it did belong to someone with unfettered access to the museum, someone so visible they became invisible. "And that," Alistair said, his gaze steady, "led to my epiphany, a sudden moment of realization. The sequin didn't just point to a person, it pointed to a personality. Someone gregarious or sociable who could move through a crowd charmingly while performing a theft in plain sight. But it also pointed to an acerbic nature, a bitterness sharp enough to justify such an act. Lady Beatrice's well-known family rivalry provided the motive she hid behind her sparkling, sociable facade." Alistair closed his notebook. The mystery of the lexicon locket was solved, not just with footprints and fingerprints, but with words and their powerful meanings. Thanks so much for joining me on this lexical detective journey. If you enjoyed untangling this mystery and picking up some new vocabulary along the way, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures in language. Let me know in the comments which word was your favorite. See you next time.